Marcus Doyle had buried his sister 8 months ago, and still had not touched the envelope she had left in his desk drawer, marked only with a name he did not recognize. Then a woman named Ivy Bennett walked into his office for a job interview. And the moment she said her own name out loud, his hand went cold around his coffee cup. Because that was the exact name written on the envelope. He had not planned on remembering it that day. Most mornings he did not let himself think about the drawer at all. It sat beneath a stack of shipping contracts he never touched. The envelope pushed to the back like something he could outwait if he just gave it enough time. Grief, in his experience, worked the same way debt did. Ignore it long enough and it stops feeling urgent. It never actually went away. Ivy Bennett was 29, plus size, and used to being underestimated the second she walked into a room. She had worked 3 jobs to get through business school and still ended up doing data entry for a mid-sized logistics firm that barely knew her name. When a recruiter called about an executive assistant position paying triple her current salary, she almost laughed and hung up. Then she heard the company name, Doyle Shipping and Freight, one of the biggest import operations on the East Coast, run by a man everyone in the industry either respected or feared, sometimes both at once. She had spent the morning of the interview rehearsing answers in front of her bathroom mirror in an apartment 2 bus transfers from downtown, smoothing down a blazer she had bought secondhand and altered herself because tailoring cost more than she made in a week. She was not nervous about the questions. She had been answering hard questions with a straight face since she was 17. She was nervous about the room itself, the kind of glass and steel lobby that made people like her feel like they needed a reason to be standing in it. She told herself it was just a job. She had no idea it was about to answer a question she had been carrying her whole life without ever having the courage to ask it out loud. Marcus Doyle ran his company the way he ran everything else, with total control and zero patience for surprises. He was 36, sharp-jawed, quiet in the particular way of men who had learned early that silence made people nervous enough to tell the truth faster. Underneath the shipping licenses and the customs paperwork sat a second business most of his employees never saw, the kind that moved through the same warehouses after dark, the kind that had made the Doyle name mean something different on certain streets than it meant on Wall Street. His sister, Claire, had never been part of that world. She had been the soft one, the one who still believed people could be good if you gave them enough chances, and she had spent the last few years of her life running a small nonprofit that placed at risk young women into stable jobs before her heart gave out without warning on a Tuesday morning in March. Marcus had not cried at the funeral. He had stood there in a black suit shaking hands, and 3 days later found the envelope in her desk when he was clearing out her office, sealed, his name on the front in her handwriting, and a second name written just below it. Ivy Bennett. Nothing else. No explanation. He had never opened it. Some part of him was not ready to know why his sister, days before she died, had written down the name of a stranger and left it for him specifically to find. He had told himself 100 different stories about what it might mean. A donor, a volunteer, someone Claire had helped and simply wanted him to check in on, the way she was always asking him to check in on people he had no time for. He had almost convinced himself it did not matter, that whatever Claire had meant to say could stay unsaid, filed away with the rest of the things he was not ready to feel. Then the name walked through his door in person, and every version of that story collapsed at once. Now the stranger was sitting across from him in his own office, hands folded politely in her lap, answering interview questions with a calm, sharp confidence that made 2 of his senior managers visibly relax for the first time in weeks. She was good. Genuinely good, the kind of organization that made chaos disappear before it became a crisis. He barely heard half of what she said. He kept staring at her, running her name through his memory, trying to place a connection that refused to surface. She talked through her experience streamlining a logistics team of 40 people with 2 part-time assistants and a spreadsheet system she had built herself because the company would not spring for better software. One of his managers, a stiff, humorless man named Frank who rarely reacted to anything in an interview, actually laughed out loud at one of her answers and then looked faintly embarrassed about it. Marcus noticed that too. He noticed everything about her, and none of it explained the tightness building behind his ribs. "Mr. Doyle," she said finally, noticing his silence had gone on a beat too long. "Did I lose you somewhere in that answer?" "No," he said, recovering quickly. "You were hired." Start Monday. She blinked, caught off guard by how fast the decision came. Most interviews did not end with an offer before the interviewer had asked a single follow-up question. Just like that, just like that, he said, though the truth was more complicated than he was ready to explain to a woman he had known for 11 minutes. She left the building that afternoon walking a little taller than she had walked in, replaying the interview in her head and still not quite believing her luck. She did not know yet that luck had nothing to do with it. She did not know that somewhere above her, in a corner office with the blinds half drawn, a man was standing at his window staring down at the street where she had just disappeared, wondering how a stranger could feel like the answer to a question he had not let himself ask. Her first weeks at Doyle Shipping were a blur of learning his systems, his temper, and the strange, careful distance he kept from her that felt different than professional boundaries usually felt. He watched her more than a normal boss watched an assistant. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable exactly, more like he was trying to solve something and she was the only piece of the puzzle he could not get to fit. She learned his coffee order by the second day, black, no sugar, and the exact tone of voice that meant a call needed to be transferred immediately versus the tone that meant he wanted 5 minutes alone first. She learned which of the senior managers were afraid of him and which ones simply respected him, and how to tell the difference by the way they knocked on his door. She learned that he ate lunch at his desk every single day, always alone, always working, until the third week when he started asking if she had eaten yet, and then started ordering enough for two without ever quite admitting that was what he was doing. She noticed things about him too. The way his jaw tightened every time someone mentioned his sister's old charity, which the company still quietly funded. The way he kept a framed photo on his desk turned slightly away from visitors, like he was not ready to explain who was in it. The way he sometimes stood in his office doorway watching her work at her desk outside, and when she caught him, he never looked away first. There was a particular Thursday in her second week when the whole office ran late finishing an international shipment audit, everyone else clearing out by 7 while Ivy stayed behind cross-referencing numbers that refused to balance. Marcus found her still at her desk past 9, taking out containers stacked beside her monitor, and instead of telling her to go home, he pulled a chair over and started checking the same numbers from the other direction. Neither of them said much. They did not need to. By the time the totals finally matched at 11, something between them had shifted, quiet and unspoken, the kind of trust that does not announce itself so much as simply arrive and stay. It was also that same week that Ivy first heard the name Castellano, though it meant nothing to her at the time. A courier had arrived late one evening with a sealed package for Marcus, and when Marcus opened it in front of her without thinking, his face went cold for a moment before he caught himself. "It is nothing," he said, sliding the package into a locked drawer. "Old business." Ivy did not push, but she noticed the way his hand had tightened around the edge of the desk, the same tightness she would later learn to recognize as the look of a man watching a threat circle closer than he wanted to admit. 3 weeks in, she finally asked him directly, "Can I say something without it costing me the job?" "Depends what it is. You look at me like you are trying to remember something. It is a little unsettling, Mr. Doyle." He set down the folder he had been holding, weighing how much to tell her. "My sister passed away 8 months ago. She left something on her desk with your name written on it. I do not know why. I hired you partly to find out." Ivy went very still. "My name? Are you sure?" "Ivy Bennett. It is not a common enough name to be a coincidence." She sat down slowly across from him, memory pulling at something she had not thought about in years. "There was a woman who helped me once. A long time ago before business school. I was 17, living in a shelter after things fell apart at home, and a woman from some nonprofit helped me get into a job training program that changed everything for me. I never knew her name. I was too overwhelmed at the time to ask, and by the time I thought to look her up, the program had folded and there was no record I could find." Marcus felt something shift hard in his chest. What did she look like? Kind eyes. Soft-spoken. She used to say everyone deserved one real chance, not 10 excuses. Ivy's voice caught slightly. "She is the reason I believed I could go to college at all." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out the framed photo he always kept turned away from visitors, sliding it across the desk toward her. Ivy's hand flew to her mouth. "That is her," she whispered. "That is the woman who helped me." That is my sister, Marcus said quietly. Claire. The room went silent except for the hum of the office outside. Ivy stared at the photo, tears gathering that she did not bother hiding, while Marcus watched her with an expression she could not quite read. Somewhere between grief and disbelief and something warmer underneath both. She wrote your name down before she died, he said. I think she wanted me to find you. I just do not know why. That question sat between them for days, unanswered, pulling them closer in the strange gravity of shared grief neither of them had expected to share with anyone. Ivy started staying later, not because the job demanded it, but because leaving felt like walking away from the one thread connecting her to the woman who had changed her life. Marcus started opening up in small pieces, telling her about Claire's stubborn kindness, her refusal to give up on people everyone else had written off, the way she used to say the family business could fund 100 quiet good deeds if you just knew where to look for them. He told her about the two of them growing up in a house that had more money than warmth, their father a hard, distant man who ran the company before Marcus did and taught his son that sentiment was a liability in business and everywhere else. Claire had been the only one who never learned that lesson properly. She had cried at every sad movie, given her coat away to strangers on cold nights, and spent her 20s infuriating their father by refusing to take a single job in the family company. Marcus had resented her for that once, when he was younger and angrier and convinced that softness was something you grew out of. By the time he understood she had been right all along, it was too late to tell her so. He also started telling her things he had never told an employee, about the second half of his business, the deals that happened after the legitimate paperwork was filed, the enemies that came with a life like his. He mentioned the Castellano crew for the first time that week, almost in passing, the way a man mentions a storm on the horizon he has been tracking for months and hoping would pass over someone else's city instead. They have wanted a piece of this company for years, he said. They are patient. That is what makes them dangerous. He was not sure why he trusted her with it. Maybe because Claire had trusted her with something first, and he had learned a long time ago to trust his sister's instincts even after she was gone. Some evenings they did not talk about Claire at all. Ivy told him about the 3 jobs she had worked through business school, the year she had slept in her car for 2 months rather than fall further behind on tuition, the particular satisfaction of finally being good enough at something that people stopped looking past her. Marcus found himself telling her things he had never said out loud to anyone, not even Claire, about the weight of running 2 businesses at once, the constant arithmetic of which version of himself he had to be in any given room. Ivy listened to the way she read a manifest, carefully, missing nothing, and somewhere in those quiet evenings the distance between boss and assistant had quietly stopped applying to either of them. The danger arrived without warning on a Thursday evening. The Castellano crew had been circling Doyle shipping for months, unhappy about a merger Marcus had blocked that would have handed them control of 2 major ports. When Ivy stayed late finishing a shipment audit, she noticed a discrepancy buried in the manifests, a pattern of falsified weights on 3 containers scheduled to move through the harbor that night, weights that did not match anything in the legitimate paperwork. She brought it straight to Marcus, spreading the documents across his desk. Someone is using your company's manifests to move something that is not yours. Whoever it is knows your systems well enough to make it look clean. His face darkened as he scanned the numbers. Castellano, he said. They have had someone inside for weeks. This is how they have been planning to blow up the harbor deal and make it look like my company did it. Before either of them could react further, the office door burst open. 2 men in dark jackets stormed in, one of them grabbing Ivy by the arm before Marcus could move. You should not have looked at those files. The man snarled. Marcus was across the room in seconds, driving his fist into the first man's jaw hard enough to send him sprawling into a filing cabinet. The second man lunged, and Marcus caught his arm mid-swing, twisting it back until the man dropped to his knees with a shout of pain. Ivy, freed and shaking but clear-headed, grabbed the heavy brass desk lamp and swung it hard into the back of the first man's head as he tried to rise again, dropping him flat. Silence crashed back into the office, broken only by ragged breathing and the distant wail of sirens someone downstairs had already called in. Marcus turned to her immediately, hands checking her shoulders, her arms, searching for injury with a franticness that cracked straight through his usual control. Are you hurt? Ivy, look at me. I am okay, she said, voice shaking but steady enough. I am okay, Marcus. He pulled her against his chest without thinking, and for a long moment neither of them spoke, just the sound of 2 hearts slowing down together in the wreckage of the office. You should not have stayed late, he said into her hair. If I had not, you would not have known about the manifests until it was too late to stop them. She pulled back to look at him. I found the discrepancy because I actually read every line instead of skimming for red flags. That is the job you hired me for. Let me do it. The Castellano crew's failed attempt to frame Doyle shipping became public within days. Exposed clean and simple through the falsified manifests Ivy had already flagged and copied before the attack. Marcus did not need to retaliate with violence. The evidence did the work on its own, turning half the harbor authority against Castellano's operation and scattering what remained of his leadership within the month. In the days after, the office moved differently around them. Frank started addressing questions to Ivy before he addressed them to Marcus, an unspoken acknowledgement of who actually kept the company running. Marcus caught himself watching her across meetings the way he used to watch competitors, looking for the tell that would explain how someone could walk into chaos twice in one lifetime and come out steadier each time. He never found it. He stopped looking for an explanation and simply let himself be grateful instead. In the quiet weeks after, Marcus finally opened Claire's envelope properly, sitting beside Ivy on the office sofa with the framed photo between them. Inside was a short letter, Claire's familiar handwriting looping across the page, explaining simply that she had never forgotten the shy 17-year-old she had helped years ago, that she had tracked her progress quietly from a distance over the years with pride, and that if anything ever happened to her, she wanted her brother to find this remarkable woman and give her every opportunity his company could offer, because Claire had always believed Ivy deserved a real chance, not 10 excuses. Marcus read it twice, throat tight, before setting it down carefully on the table between them. She was matchmaking from beyond the grave. Ivy said softly, half laughing, half in tears. She always did believe in getting exactly what she wanted. Marcus said, and for the first time since the funeral, something in his chest loosened enough to let him smile. He reached for Ivy's hand, turning it over gently on his own. I do not think this was only about the job, Ivy. I think my sister saw something between us before either of us had the chance to. She was very smart. Ivy whispered. She was. He agreed and leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away before he closed the distance between them completely. In the months that followed, the office learned to work around the two of them without ever quite acknowledging what had changed, the way offices do when something good happens to people they respect. Frank stopped pretending to be surprised when Ivy sat in on strategy meetings she technically had no reason to attend. The senior team started routing certain decisions through her first, a habit that began as convenience and quietly became trust. Marcus never announced anything. He did not have to. Anyone who watched them in a room together for longer than a minute understood exactly what they were looking at. Months later, Ivy stood in the doorway of the nonprofit Claire had built, now fully funded and expanded under Doyle Shipping's name, watching a group of teenage girls file into a job training session much like the one that had changed her own life years ago. The building had a new wing now, funded quietly and without fanfare, with Claire's name etched above the door in simple lettering exactly the way she would have wanted it. Understated, purposeful, more interested in the work than the recognition. Marcus came up behind her, wrapping an arm around her waist, watching the same scene with quiet pride. She would have loved this, Ivy said. She would have loved you more, Marcus said. She usually was right about people. They stood there a while longer, watching the girls settle into folding chairs with the same nervous, hopeful energy Ivy remembered from her own first day, 12 years and an entire life ago. One of the girls glanced up and caught Ivy watching, and instead of looking away, Ivy smiled at her the way a stranger had once smiled at a scared 17-year-old in a shelter, the kind of smile that said someone sees you and it is enough. Ivy reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook she had started keeping since the harbor attack. The kind Claire used to carry everywhere according to Marcus, plain, cheap, always half full of names and small notes about people who needed a second look. She wrote the new girl's name down at the top of a fresh page, the same way a woman with kind eyes had once written down a name on a scrap of paper and trusted it would matter someday. Marcus watched her do it and said nothing, because some things do not need explaining twice. If the story moved you, tell us in the comments about a time someone believed in you before you believed in yourself.